Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Daniel Morris, Chief Market Strategist and Co-Head Investment Insight Center at BNP Paribas Asset Management to discuss prospects for global equity markets. Daniel, it's great to see you again. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thank you.
And Daniel, as we start to look ahead to recovery, do you think current expectations may be too optimistic and the market multiple placed on earnings is unsustainably high?
Well, of course, it's always a question of timing, and essentially the markets have already priced in a lot of the good news that we anticipate this year. So if you look certainly on trailing earnings, it would seem that the PE is quite high. Consequently, what we anticipate is not necessarily such significant price appreciation, certainly as we've had since March of last year, but at the same time, earnings will continue to appreciate. And as they say, the market kind of grows into the multiple. So you get the rising earnings, your price in terms of that PE doesn't go up quite as much. And so that ratio of the price to the earnings comes down. So you do still get price appreciation, but maybe not quite at this point as much as you get on the earnings side.
What are your thoughts about inflation rates and the continued rotation that we're seeing into value stocks?
Well, it's certainly probably the most crucial question that any investor is facing right now, whether it be equities or fixed income. We do believe in the reflation trade, and our allocations reflect that. At the same time, though, I think we want to always be questioning or asking ourselves when maybe it's gone as far as it's going to go. And the reason we say that is, on one hand, if we think about inflation and the potential for inflation and inflation expectations to rise, we think there is a limit to that ultimately. It's not like we're going back to 5% inflation. So as we get closer to or above, hopefully, the Fed's target, that would suggest, at least on the inflation side, that's run its course. And then that's also the point when you're going to anticipate some kind of signaling from the Fed that they're going to need to start tapering and ultimately raise rates in order to keep inflation expectations contained. So for now, we still think there is reflation ahead, but at the same time, we're going to always be questioning, okay, when do we need to start thinking about the next leg in the market movements?
What about the higher quality, growthier stocks that we saw lead us into the market rally? How do you feel about that in the longer term, despite the fact we're seeing that value trade?
Well, it's exactly that. In the medium term, we do expect a return to the outperformance in growth and in quality. So right now, it is the opportunity for value to make up some lost ground. So we're looking towards sectors and countries that reflect that value bias. But ultimately, we really do believe it's going to be the long-run growth potential within growth, within technology, that's going to drive kind of the longer-term outperformance of those sectors in that style relative to other parts of the market.
So are you using pullbacks as an opportunity to add to some of these positions?
Well, we actually just did that. We had clearly a bit of a surprise over the last week or so. We've taken advantage of that to increase our allocation to the US, to increase our allocation to China, because we anticipate that it is kind of the shock, if you will, from this quite quick move in real rates that set the markets back, but it certainly hasn't changed our, for us, still optimistic medium-term outlook.
So overall, Daniel, it sounds like you expect some more upside for equities in 2021.
Definitely, but modest expectations. I mean, really, when you think after we went through a year that had the biggest quarterly decline in GDP, I think, since World War II, and we got 18% returns, one shouldn't get too greedy. We do think we are going to have upside in equities, but certainly more likely around single digits and not double digits like we had last year.
All right, Daniel, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.